Right, let's get more on our top story. The US strikes Iran and Iranian attacks here in the Gulf. Joining us from Doha is Ambassador Joey Hood. He's a former senior US diplomat who served as ambassador to Tunisia and was the former acting Assistant Secretary of State for the Middle East and North Africa. Also joining us is Abbas Aslani. He's a senior research fellow at the Centre for Middle East Strategic Studies. He joins us from Tehran. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining me today. Ambassador, I'll start with you. How far back have these attacks set the diplomatic talks?
Well, I think the diplomatic talks under the MOU now are done. So now the parties are going to need to find a different framework. They may even need to find different mediators because Iran has been insistent on attacking the Qatari mediator now several times in hitting commercial ships on June 25th, June 27th, and July 7th. On at least two of those occasions, they hit Qatari ships or ships that were carrying Qatari crude, Qatari LNG. So it's a clear message. And they've been hitting sites, as you saw, as you just talked about here, in Qatar that are, the Iranians say, are related to U.S. military bases or installations. One thing to understand is that the United States is a guest on all of the bases where it might have a presence in the Middle East. These are Gulf country bases that are used for training, for exercises, for other things by the U.S. military. And I don't believe that at this point the U.S. military has a lot of forces or aircraft or other infrastructure exposed at these places. So I think a lot of this targeting is not really aimed at the United States. It's aimed at the Gulf countries. It's a message to them, and especially to the mediators. You'd better get on our side of this conflict now.
Yeah, Abbas, I want to ask you a two-pronged question off two comments there that the ambassador made. One, that the diplomatic talks seem to be done at this point. There's no real reason to continue them, it would seem, given where things are at. But also, if Iran is focused on the Strait of Hormuz and a protocol there, why bother with the retaliatory attacks? Because they're clearly not going to dissuade the US.
As I have been hearing, Iran has suspended the talks for a final agreement with the United States as a result of the recent moves by the US and threats by Donald Trump. From Iranian perspective, the US strikes against Iran is due to the Iran holding the line on its new security arrangements in the Strait of Hormuz by the book and under Article 5 of the MOU. It seemed that initially Donald Trump was seeing this MOU as a suitable off-ramp from a war with Iran and its consequences, but he's feeling the heat from the domestic criticism as Israeli pressure. So that's why maybe he's resorting to these types of actions in order to save face. And, as this goes on, the chances for a diplomatic settlement becomes narrower and the situation becomes much more complicated. And that's why Iran also sees these strikes, aimed at trying to undermine Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz. But despite these threats, despite the attacks, it is yet insisting on its position. The timing, the scope, and the size of the recent skirmishes have been somehow limited. That indicates that maybe the U.S. is not willing to light the regional powder keg. But this is playing with fire, and by any miscalculation, the situation can spiral out of control, and this can turn into let's say, maybe a regional war. Okay. So far, we are not yet there, but it is very much likely to see such kind of scenario unfolding.
Do you see it returning to a regional war? President Trump says Iran has called and wants to do a deal.
No, I don't believe Iran has called and wants to do a deal. But I do believe that Iran has launched a regional war. We are in that regional war now.
Did Iran launch a regional war? Is this not the start of a war that was started by Israel and the US on Iran?
No, this is a new phase, actually. This is a new war at this point. Donald Trump made a strategic mistake in attacking Iran in the first place. Then Iran responded with a strategic mistake of its own by attacking the Gulf countries so much. If it had concentrated its fire on U.S. forces and on Israel, then I think the rest of the region and the world probably would have retained some sympathy for a regime that was fighting for its survival, especially after Trump made some of his more heinous comments about ending civilization and so forth. But by then responding, even after hostilities formally ended, by hitting the Gulf countries' infrastructure, their commercial ships, their economic lifelines so many times, Iran has made it extremely clear at this point that they have taken the opportunity of this new regime and this new situation to launch a war that they hope will give them custodianship over the Gulf economies, and therefore a lot of influence with especially the countries in Asia that are highly dependent on the petroleum coming out of the Gulf, and other countries as well that are affected by the price of oil and the availability of those products.
Mr. Aslani, relations with Gulf neighbours of Iran have most definitely been strained by its actions in this conflict, no matter who is pinning the blame on who. And with continued attacks like we have seen over the past couple of nights, and those attacks on Qatari tankers in the Strait of Hormuz and the likes, what is Iran going to do to actually bring this conflict to an end? What can it do? Because it is still alienating its neighbours. It's doing more damage to the region instead of bringing this conflict to a close.
Well, Iran was doing the same thing it was doing prior to the war, meaning engaging in diplomatic negotiations and track in order to find a negotiated settlement. But the United States back then, along with Israel, attacked the country, specifically at a time that progress was being made in the talks, and the regional countries were facilitating and mediating those negotiations. Yet again, this is happening, so we cannot expect Iran not to engage in self-defense, because there has been, misinterpretation and misconceptions in the United States and the West that when Iran shows any sign of flexibility, this is interpreted as a sign of weakness. So this could have been inviting and could be seen as a red carpet for further and additional attacks against the country. And despite this, Iran has been trying to somehow control the scope and the size of its reaction to American, actions. Despite the recent war and the aggression by the United States that provoked a situation that somehow strained Tehran's relations with regional capitals, we are seeing some, let's say, communications with Iran and regional countries. There has been some discussions between Iranian officials and their counterparts in the region, which is aimed at amending those ties. This is not something to be liked by Israel, and the United States tries also to create division between Iran and its neighbors. But developments are also impacting the atmosphere. But I think yet there is some motivations by regional countries as well as Iran in order to improve the relations despite the recent challenges and ongoing ones. But we cannot, address the issue in a vacuum, because external elements are also trying to impact the process and somehow disrupt any positive trend between Tehran and regional capitals.
Okay. Abbas Aslani joining us from Tehran, and Ambassador Joey Hood, thank you both.